I just started the recording, so we will officially open our fourth virtual coin meeting. As I say every time, we hope to be back together again sometime in the near future. And until then, I'm going to keep the background I have here and pretend that I am there. And Marc is going to keep drinking his beers, so that'll make him feel like he's there. And the rest of us just need to do whatever you need to do to make you feel like we're all together in our normal spot. But thank you for coming, and to those of you that are listening on the recording, thank you for listening to the recordings. I will send out the recording tomorrow. We've been getting between 60 and 100 people on the recordings, and so that's great. We're getting our message out there and hopefully helping people. If you are not one of the panelists for our meeting today, and just go ahead and mute. I think if you do have questions, you can throw them into the chat, or you can unmute and ask a question anytime during the session here. So just so I don't forget, our next meeting will be July 21st. It's the third Tuesday of July, and that one will be TBD as far as the speaker. We haven't made any decisions on that yet. But this week we're very fortunate to have some people who are very knowledgeable about the Columbus market. We're going to have a panel discussion. It's going to be led by Marc Kade and Brian Urbanski, Sarah Karakaian. I say that right, hopefully. Close.
You nailed it.
Yes. And then Tim Dye are going to answer some questions, and Marc's going to lead us in a discussion. As I said, we welcome any questions or comments that you have. And with that, I will pass it over to Marc, and we will get started.
Well, hey, everybody out there, really excited you could join us. I know this is still really kind of a hard time doing virtuals, and I will just give you a little bit of a teaser. We are thinking about some ways to start to move to some type of maybe a hybrid system of meeting virtually and maybe some smaller groups. So stay tuned on that. But otherwise, we wanted to kind of talk about what do we think is going to happen in the Columbus market. Actually kind of came up with this idea listening to NPR probably about a month or so ago. And if anybody listens to All Sides with Ann Fisher, she's occasionally on my radio, so I'll just listen to it. And she had a really cool panel that was talking about, hey, what is all this coronavirus, pandemic world going to do to the Columbus real estate market? Now, that was like about 45 days ago when that was on. And what it got me thinking was how much things I didn't even consider, because they had different panelists on there who were from different parts of Columbus doing different things. And it made me really start thinking, how do I think this is going to affect me, or how do I think it's going to really affect the market in Columbus and other markets around the country? So I decided that'd be a great idea for us. Now, so basically we found three different people who can answer same types of questions. So we got Brian Urbanski, does a lot in a really creative field of his wholesaling and all the different things that Brian does. We know it's something different that a lot of people do. And then we got Sarah, who is our Airbnb hostess queen. Although we got to give a little shout out to Nick, although I know he's not there, but he helps out as well too with his Nestrs program. And then Tim, I really don't know Tim as much, but I know he's from Jim. He's doing a lot more in terms of a lot of long-term rent and hold strategies and some other different burrs and things like that. So we try to find three different people from three different parts of real estate and try to get their opinions. And hopefully at the end of the day or the end of this little meeting, it might start you thinking about maybe there's a couple of things you can consider that, in your own decision process, how are things going to look in Columbus 6 months, 12 months, and maybe even 2-3 years from now. All right. So without any further ado, I just wanted to kind of get out there and start with each one of them, the same kind of question. So we'll go ahead and we'll start with Tim on this one. Tim, how has the recent coronavirus pandemic impacted your specific business over the last 3 months?
Well, thanks for the introduction, guys. It's a pleasure to be here with everyone. I think that, our business has always been pretty virtual. We do a ton of direct to seller marketing, which I'm sure a lot of people do. And we adjusted our marketing language a bit just to kind of put sellers at ease, to let them know that we're adjusting and trying to take everyone's safety in mind. So that was, one piece to that. Operationally, there's not a lot that changed for us internally. We did for a while. We stopped having in-person team meetings for our own small team. We have about six people that work for me that we meet weekly, and so we started doing those virtual, just like we are here. We've since resumed in-person meetings there. It was interesting. I would say that overall, I felt like sellers were less concerned about the pandemic than I thought they would be. I mean, we definitely had certain folks that were concerned, and we were adjusting to that. But overall, I would say we were probably a little bit more concerned about trying to take care of their safety than them. So I think that was kind of the biggest things there for us.
Okay. Now, Sarah, you're dealing in the Airbnb space a lot, so I gotta imagine there's been a dramatic impact to your business. How have you seen things go in the last 3 months?
Yeah, so hey everyone, my name is Sarah, currently holding down the lady investor front. And short-term rentals are my sweet spot. I've been hosting short-term rentals since 2012, arguably before they were cool. And I own my own short-term rentals and I manage that of others. And I think I might have the most colorful 3-month history here since COVID hit. It absolutely impacted the short-term rental markets. In March was one of the scariest months of my life. We went from, really had a exciting outlook with the Arnold, and then that got like weird last minute, and then everyone announced that we are in an official pandemic, and in one day we went from 90% occupancy all the way down to 0% for that month for some of our properties. So, but the interesting thing is since March, April and May have absolutely been on an uptick. All of my properties across the board are back up to about 85% occupancy, and we're operating about 25% less in pricing than we were this time last year. So I think we're going to talk about projections later on, but the past 3 months, has definitely been a roller coaster ride. I think it also affected short-term rental hosts very differently, depending on their management style and how they were associated with the rentals. Some people were, subjected to paying a lease no matter what's happening, and some people work on a commission base. So some people manage their own short-term rentals and just experience probably what I did in terms of going from 85% occupancy, 90% occupancy to 0. But yeah, we survived and we're still hanging in there.
Okay, great. Brian, I mean, your business is definitely much different than a lot of the normal traditional long-term rent and hold kind of people and stuff like that, especially where you get your properties from and what you do with your properties. How has the last 3 months been for you?
Well, I tell you, I was just like everybody else. I was really wondering how people were going to respond to it. And in my business, I mean, I'm predominantly a buy and hold guy. But over the last year and a half, I've shifted that strategy a lot towards fix and flip, and even what's known in the industry as wholesaling, where I'll actually buy a property, clean. It's like wholesaling, but I own the property and I clean it out. I'll do some very minor repairs if necessary, and then put it on the market, usually on MLS, to sell it to other rehabbers. And I am flabbergasted right now on how high the market is and what properties are selling for. And I have properties in probably from the affordable housing range up to maybe 150, 175 for single families, and I have duplexes and other multifamily properties. And I'm trying to sell everything I can, simply because the inventory is so tight right now, that even fixer-upper properties, as an example, I had a property in 43224, parallel to Carl Road, just north of East North Broadway, that needed a $50,000 rehab. ARV is probably 140, and I had a bidding war for the property, and it needed $50,000 worth of work, which doesn't make any sense to me, what prices are being paid. And this was not an out of town, with all due respect to Art and anybody else who may be on the East or West Coast. It wasn't even the out of town buyers that typically pay a premium to get into our market. This was a local guy who had already done 6 other deals this year. So I don't have anything real, exciting to say, like as far as drama or anything, other than, I'm a marketing guy. Sales and marketing is really what I do. And I, as you mentioned, I have a foreclosure assistance program. We just started this month, a landlord assistance company that's going to be doing some different things, and I'll have more to announce on that in the months ahead. But I'm finding sellers are not, the sellers that I work with, which predominantly are landlords and absentee owners, are not really phased that much with this. And getting inventory it remains challenging, but our phone's ringing, we're doing deals, and once we get them, selling them is the easy part. So if anybody out there is wholesaling and you're worried about it, or you're concerned, I wouldn't be, at least as far as selling them is concerned. Getting them is still, buying them is still a challenge because it's such a strong market. But I'm very optimistic short term, and I think at least for the rest of the year, in Columbus, I can't speak to other markets, but from the other investors I know, I'm in a couple of brainstorming groups, mastermind groups, and that one of my friends has 350 units, and he's doing okay. He's obviously, some people can't pay, but he's got some things, he's got some policies in place, and even somebody with that large of a portfolio, when I hear that they're doing pretty well, that leads me to believe that I think our market is, at least for the short term, is going to be okay. 2021 is going to be a whole different ball game. We'll have to see what happens with the election, but I think as far as buying and selling is concerned, we're not missing a beat right now. Knock on wood.
So a little follow-up question either for Tim or Brian on this one, because I know both you guys carry some long-term rentals. What kind of struggles have you had, if any, really, in terms of collecting rents over the last 3 months?
Yeah, I mean, we were, I think everyone was really prepared for a major problem. We had meetings, and we had a whole system in place to help tenants and guide them through, and we really didn't want to have to pursue evictions. I know they were all kind of delayed temporarily anyways, but we were pleasantly surprised that it really was a non-issue. I think communication was key. We communicated with all of our tenants up front. We kind of made it clear that, hey, look, we know that there's people in a tough spot. We want to work with you. We want to communicate with you. We have some options for you. We had, I'm a tech guy, so I created a really simple kind of like Google form that they could fill out for assistance, just to make sure they were kind of doing their part for, temporary work or applying for employment. And like the end of April was approaching, and we weren't hearing anything from tenants, and then they just all paid the rent on May 1st, like quietly. And the same thing happened in June again. So we were just, it was a really pleasant surprise. I think that goes back to careful tenant selection and tenant screening, which we kind of pride ourselves in. We really take our time and screen tenants and make sure. And I think it's just the, I guess for lack of a better term, the quality of tenants that just kind of, they do what they have to do to pay the rent, even though we had some options in case they didn't. So we had very, very little impact. And the couple people that we did, we worked with them and created a win-win situation, and it was fine.
Sarah, I know that, maybe the biggest impact I saw in terms of being able to make money was in that Airbnb space a little bit, because as you mentioned, you had to immediately drop to zero. No one was kind of moving and doing anything. I have the same thing on my Airbnb. But, it started to come back. But what I also noticed in the beginning of, it seemed like a lot of people, said, oh, I'm getting out. And I started seeing homes for sale. Speak to that. I mean, concerns, opportunity. What's your thoughts?
To put it into perspective, there were about 1,436 something Airbnbs in Columbus proper, and there are now less than 900. So for someone like me who really loves the hospitality aspect of it, I am well aware this is not a passive investment strategy. It's very active. I'm excited about it. It's my occupancies are back up, my pricing is inching up very slowly, and just think about it, there are no conventions, there are no sports games going on, and we're still doing pretty darn well. And then moving forward into next year, I just don't know that I'm going to see a ton of those same people get back into the same strategy that was once there before, especially if they experienced any type of, you know, financial strife in that way. Like there are some big companies that, you know, have gone under since they were 2 weeks into COVID and they went under. So that just kind of goes to show you what kind of businesses they were running, that they were already on, you know, thin ice. But I think it's a lot of opportunity. If anyone on this call right now has always been interested in getting into the short-term rental game, and you really love the idea of hosting people from other cities, other countries into a really well done short-term rental, I think you're going to be fine for the rest of 2020, and I think 2021 is going to be rockin', is assuming, you know, we can get those events back up and running in the Columbus area. Yeah, I'm excited. I'm on calls like this all the time with short-term rental people across the country, and they share the same sentiment as I do. Whoop. Am I back on or no? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, Sarah.
We can hear you.
We can hear you.
We can hear you.
Oh, okay. Okay. I didn't know if it was me. So yeah, I'm excited about it. I think there's a lot more room for those of us who want to stay in the game and get back to what it was, you know, prior to 3 or 4 years ago. And yeah, I think it's going to be, travel always bounces back fast. Just think about it, in 2001, we were kind of, you know, uneasy to travel. 2008, no one could really afford to travel. And 2008 also brought on Airbnb and that really affordable way of traveling. So the fact that we all kind of had figured out how to adapt to travel back then, I think people are itching to get out. If you have a short-term rental in like a wooded area or in Hocking Hills or a lake, I mean, just this weekend I tried to plan a weekend getaway for 2 weeks ahead of time, and it was really hard to find a really nice short-term rental to book out. So yeah, I'm really hopeful.
I just got back from Savannah, Sarah. I stayed in Airbnb there. I booked it like right at the height of the fear, like in early April, because that's just what I do. I try to buy low and sell high.
Yeah.
It's got this beautiful 4-story historic house in downtown Savannah for like $220 a night. And by the time, you know, 2 weeks before we left to get there, I looked at their availability again. They're booked all summer long for $800 a night.
Oh, yeah.
So it's definitely rebounding. And we feel like we got a great deal to stay at a place we probably wouldn't have otherwise booked.
And I don't want to steal the mic for too long, but if you are an Airbnb host on here or thinking about it, the really exciting thing is this new thing called a midterm stay. So it's that stay between a year lease, vacant year lease, and then the 30 days or less, right? I would say, gosh, 60% of my bookings right now at a lot of my properties are 30 days or more. And that's exciting because I don't have to pay excise tax, you know, and yeah, it's like that perfect world of not being locked into a year lease where I don't see properties as often as I do with my short-term rentals. And we still get that premium, you know, rental rate. So that's also been really exciting to see and adjust to.
It looks like our host fell off. He's trying to log back in. So I don't know if you guys shared some comments or questions before this started that you can ask yourselves the question.
Yeah, I can jump in there, Jim.
Thanks,
Tim. One of
Tim.
the next questions he had was, with no specific timeline for a return to normal, what's your opinion on home prices in Columbus moving forward for 6 months, a year, or more? Brian really did a nice job of touching on this earlier, which I would 100% agree with. We're seeing prices right now that for our flips, when we rehab and resell a property, and we usually have 2 or 3 of those a month that we've rehabbed, like full flips, we're seeing the demand for those unlike anything we've seen since about 2017, where everything is exploding with showings, multiple offers, prices going above list price almost every time. And then the same thing with the wholesale properties that obviously still need rehabbed. We wholesale several per month. We wholesale some here and there, as Brian does. Same thing, as long as it's not completely falling apart, and it just needs your typical, cabinets, floors, standard, what we would call standard rehab. It's just, there's so little inventory that the prices are nuts. In fact, we just talked at our team meeting today internally about a couple properties that we'll probably put into contract that we normally wouldn't, but everyone's just calling us looking for properties, and that the appetite is so fierce right now that we think that we can sell them at a decent margin, that probably 60 days, 6 months ago, we definitely wouldn't have put them in contract at these prices. So that's kind of my opinion for right now. I do think it's going to be interesting the second half of the year. I think we're going to have some kind of impacts as unemployment kind of shakes out. We see where that goes. I think there's some people sitting around right now that maybe aren't saving as much for their down payment as they otherwise would have, due to a reduction in hours or furloughs or unemployment. I think that's going to kind of sneak up on us a little bit at the end of the year, but I definitely don't see any sort of, significant decline. And then, I would also agree with Brian that we just don't know what's going to happen with the election and how that's going to affect 2021 prices. So that's kind of what I'm seeing from our end.
Well, everybody, I got to apologize. Sorry, I had a little technical issues. My youngest son, who's our IT expert here, tells me I was too far away from my router. Thank you. So I moved indoors. So sorry, my scenery is not as nice. So I missed a little bit of that, but I think I'm probably hitting in a good spot here. Something I hear all the time, because I deal with a lot of consumers just buying homes in terms of looking to buy for the primary homes, and everyone's seeing these huge prices that Tim, you're just alluding to a little bit. And everyone tells me, well, I'm just going to buy a house next year when the prices go down, or, oh, well, this can't keep going on because, we're set for a crash. Any one of you please jump in and tell me what your opinions on and what you would say to someone that says, yeah, I think, we're set for a crash. And I always ask, why, but they never have a good answer. But you tell me what your thoughts are on that. I guess you're still up, Tim, so you're first.
All right. Yeah, I don't see it. No matter what data I look at, I'm just not seeing it. I've tried to talk myself into it. I'm conservative by nature, so I try to figure out the crystal ball, and no matter which way I look at the data, I just don't see a crash. Certainly we could be in for a little bit of a correction and maybe some leveling, and I know we saw that last year in 2019, just some leveling off and some cooling off of, in certain price points. But I'm not seeing, I'm never claimed to be the smartest person in the room, but I don't see anything in Columbus that dictates or that says that we're in for a crash. The demand is continuing to be high, and even when it backs off to kind of normal and inventory is tight, it's just, I think it's a really healthy market to be in right now.
What do you think, Sarah? If someone's saying, hey, the Airbnb world's about to crash, or all the homes that are around for Airbnb hosts, what are you saying?
Yeah, hosting a home has been around since the late 1800s, and it hasn't gone away since then. So I know that it's a great industry for me to stay in and stick out. And in terms of real estate and whether or not we're going to hit a crash or not, I agree with Tim 100%. I think you should always try to be as ready as possible to buy real estate, and the best time to buy real estate is the present if you can. Obviously it's great to, sell high and buy low, but just being prepared and making sure you're not over leveraged and all your assets are in check, and you're protecting yourself as much as you can as well. That's why a lot of these hosts, they got over leveraged. A lot of them had a ton of rent to pay each month, and you have 2 weeks where reservations stop coming in, and then you go under. And that's just, I really encourage everyone to have, no matter if you short-term, long-term, whatever it is, you've got a smart financial system in place so that you can stay afloat no matter what happens, so that you don't have to have a crystal ball to make it through.
Yeah, that's actually just kind of funny because you were saying like if you don't have a, no one saw the world pandemic of coronavirus coming, but you got to know that there's always something coming. And some of these businesses that went out of business after 2 weeks, and they're like, well, we never saw that coming. I'm like, you weren't prepared for anything. You weren't prepared
Right,
for
it doesn't matter. Yes,
you weren't prepared for a thunderstorm.
No,
Pandemic.
God.
So,
yes.
I really like your takes there, because it seems to me that the Airbnb space has really thinned the herd, really, which means opportunity, and take advantage of it. So something that, I think we all kind of feel that it was like just like a little speed bump and uncertainty, but really it's kind of almost kind of gone back or growing back to a normalcy in terms of how we do real estate. But what about in the future? We're reopening businesses, we're reopening downtowns and the bars and the restaurants and stuff like that, but under a different new normalcy, especially the downtown. What's everyone's take? And let's start with Brian on that one first, maybe. Brian, what's your take on the downtown area and the real estate market with, we're not at full openness in terms of the downtown, and that's such a lively social gathering. What's your points?
First of all, I think I need to do full disclosure, and that is I'm very bullish on the market in general, but downtown in particular. I've had quite a number of properties in the Franklinton area, Southern Orchards, the Children's Hospital area. Those areas are still very hot. I don't know, several weeks ago, I sold maybe a month ago, I sold a duplex in the far west part of Franklinton, which is not not the place you would want to be after dark. And I got my full asking price, which was, I thought, high for the area, for the market. I've got solid tenants in there, but it is only a stone's throw from downtown, right off of Broad. And I'm seeing strong prices across the board. Like Tim, I'm on probably a dozen or more wholesalers lists. The properties that I'm seeing coming across there, the prices are very strong, and I'm seeing some price reductions here and there from the wholesalers, but pretty much everything I get. I don't even use a buyer's list anymore. I gave that up about a year ago, and I'm going straight to MLS with flat fee listings, and my stuff is selling in probably 2 to 3 days. I'm sure Tim is probably experiencing that too, and if there's some other wholesalers on the call, they're probably seeing that. The downtown is kind of interesting because the whole exciting part of being downtown is you've got the Blue Jackets, you've got sports, you've got the Arnold, you've got all these public spaces and large group event type of things going on, and that is, as you were putting it, we have this new normalcy. For me, it's the fundamentals. Right now, inventory is low. And this is just, going back to, Warren Buffett's, idea of when people are fearful, be greedy, and when people are greedy, be fearful. Right now the market is ridiculously high because demand is artificially low, or is high because supply is artificially low, and interest rates. And I think you were telling me, Mark, a couple of weeks ago, you can get a 30-year fixed below 3%, or at least you could a few weeks ago. And when you combine the historically low interest rates with very, very high demand, and plus Columbus is growing. I'm a real big believer in fundamentals. Most of what I do on a daily basis is research. I'm getting a lot of different news feeds from Housing Wire, from CoreLogic, from a lot of different real estate and even some non-real estate entities, just to keep my fingers on the pulse of what's going on, not just here in my own market in Columbus, but nationally and globally as well. And I'm just echoing what Sarah and Tim have already said, but I think the market's very strong. I think Columbus, or the city, the downtown part of Columbus, is going to stay strong, even though we don't have a lot of the events going on right now. But I'll tell you, affordable housing for Columbus, affordable housing is huge right now. I'm seeing prices, I'm seeing rents go up, and I'm seeing prices for properties in North Linden, South Linden, East Linden, Hilltop, Near East Side, South Side, certainly Franklinton, and a lot of other areas that aren't your higher, income, your median income, your fix and flip type, retail property areas, just going for extraordinary prices. And I think that's going to continue. And again, it's about the fundamentals. I don't have a crystal ball either. But as long as interest rates stay low, and they've got nowhere to go, I think they're going to be low for a long time. Columbus is fundamentally strong. We've got a diverse industry here. We've got a number of Fortune 500 companies. We're big in banking and insurance and other things, in hospitals and colleges. And I think that's going to be, I think colleges are going to be coming back too, contrary to what, everybody's talking about online learning. I mean, we homeschool ourselves, but right now, for us, we haven't missed a beat. My family's very involved. Both of my kids are 12 and 14 are involved in the business. They do, online stuff, video things for us. And I'm seeing prices and demand across the city, whether it's, affordable housing, which is most of what I do, all the way up to, properties. I'm looking at a property tomorrow in Arlington, that, the demand even there in the higher price market is still very, very strong.
Hey, Tim, I got a question for you. So
Sure.
we got, we're not sure how this thing's going to play out in terms of the COVID-19. People think that come fall, we might have a little resurgence more of increased issues or people having the virus, which could lead to maybe we go back to some type of stay-at-home order or something like that. We just don't know. Now, I know I'm kind of concerned about that and seeing how is that going to be when we kind of keep going back and forth maybe a little bit. I was really concerned with what I thought the Ohio State University would do, whether or not they would open up, and obviously they are opening up now. We don't have all the details on that, but I really thought those types of things will really impact things in the future, and these are things that we just don't know. What are you doing with your organization? What are your thoughts and concerns with what possibly could be like 6 months and 12 months down the road?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think we kind of talked about that a lot, but I think in any market, if you stick with the fundamentals, which is you buy below market, you don't over rehab, whether it's a rental or a flip, and you don't over leverage. It's really the same advice no matter the market, quite frankly. So we just continue to do that. I think that, I think where the ebb and flow will come through the rest of the year is just deciding, a good deal is still a good deal. And it's just the exit strategy might adjust, so for example, even right now, there's a property I just put in a contract today that we've been looking at it for the last 2 to 3 to 4 weeks, and I kind of just assumed I was going to make it a rental. But the market is so absurdly hot right now that I'm like, I'm just going to spend $15,000, clean it out a little bit and painting it, and take my $30,000 and run. Easy. It's just too easy right now in that regard. I mean, it's hard to find the properties, but it kind of always is that way in Columbus. Whereas I think, that 6 months ago, the same house, we would have probably just kept it as a rental. So I think just stick with the fundamentals, collect inventory as you can. And then, if we get back into a situation where inventory gets really tight again in 6 months and the demand stays high, like we've seen over the last 60 days, it's a good opportunity to maybe sell off a couple of those things, versus holding some of them. So I think what I've worked really hard with our company over the last 4 years is having multiple exit strategies so that we're diversified. So when we get a good deal under contract, we have multiple things. Sometimes we don't even know what we're going to do with it when we put it under contract. We just know it's a good deal. So sometimes we wholesale it. Sometimes I keep it as a rental. Sometimes we flip it. Sometimes we wholesale it. I got to get on a call with Sarah because I still want to buy my first Airbnb, but I can't seem to figure that one out yet, which we will. I try not to chase the shiny object syndrome, but that's another exit strategy. So I feel like it's just the exit strategy that adjusts a little bit as these market conditions change. 3 years ago, kind of all I was doing was fix and flipping, and that worked well 3 years ago, but I kind of realized quickly that that was wearing me out. That wasn't a good long-term strategy, because that really is a job and it requires a lot of hands-on stuff. And so we really feel much better now about having multiple exit strategies with these properties.
Okay, great.
And the market really right now, it lends itself to that wonderfully. And what Tim was saying earlier, he's selling anything, just about everything he can that's not falling apart. I'm selling stuff that's falling apart, and the market is out there. So I mean, go figure.
And I will say too, for anyone interested in Airbnb, Mark, that question you just asked, like what can we prepare for if there's another stay-at-home order? Not to give a shameless plug, but I'll give a shameless plug. I have a podcast where I share weekly content on all things short-term rental. And the episode we just released last Thursday is all about that, like ways to prepare yourself. Like, had you known what happened in March 3 or 4 months prior to that, what would we have done differently? So, and also, if you're looking to get in the Airbnb marketplace, to also buy that property with multiple exit strategies. Do not buy it and then expect that short-term rental income to be your only strategy for that property. Make sure you can go to long-term, make sure it's easy to sell, like you'll live there, whatever it is for your scenario. Don't let short-term rentals be your only scenario, I beg you.
Hey, Sarah, this is Jim. If you can send me a link to your podcast, I'll include it when I send out the recording for everybody.
Will do.
Thanks.
Awesome. Yeah, and Sarah, as you said that, give me one little tidbit of teaser off of that podcast, so that way we make sure everyone's sent. So what is number one thing you need to do to prepare for a possible, resurgence of what we saw 3 months ago?
So it's so hard just to give one because there are so many. But like you were talking with the school, like with OSU, while it's opening the doors as it is right now, second-year students may or may not be required to stay in the dormitories like they've always been asked to do. So does that mean furnished, budget-friendly short-term rentals are going to be all the rage this fall? And so maybe you want to look at your calendar starting in August going forward and make it so that you can only accept a midterm type stay, and change your title to something like happy to accommodate collegiate students or what have you, and so that you can really capture that midterm stay. Because if we do have another stay-at-home order, you don't want to have those 2, 3, 4 weeks where you go from like 85% occupancy down to 0 again. So, and also make sure your Wi-Fi is primo, because as businesses are leveraging the virtual work at home stuff, you're going to see more people visiting family and staying in short-term rentals while working from home. And so you want to make sure your Wi-Fi is the most important amenity that you're offering.
It's probably a good way to get a bad Airbnb rating. Beautiful house, great location, clean, but Wi-Fi sucks, so you get 3 stars.
You piss them off if you don't have good Wi-Fi.
Well, thank you, Sarah. They gave us 2, which I will also give you a little shameless plug that, we have our first Airbnb, and we are always calling Sarah all the time and saying, what do you think? So that's actually should be your podcast name. What do I think? So thank you very much. Let's talk a little bit about, what about the outside of Columbus? Is there going to be any change to our suburbs or even outside of our suburbs? Or are we just going to kind of continue on as we, how we have been? Is maybe too early to tell what we're going to look like on outside of the 270 belt? What do you think, Brian?
I've had properties all over Franklin County and 5 of the 6 contiguous counties. I like the suburbs. I typically, when I do buy and holds there, I'm typically going to do a lease option as an exit strategy, simply because the rental prices are higher. But for fixing and flipping or even wholesaling, that market has to stay strong because the demand there is very, very strong. I'm a little concerned once you start getting into the 350, 400 price range, that market is cooling down a little bit. My broker is telling me that pretty much everything is selling, but in the maybe 450, 500 range, days on market's definitely increasing right now. And you have fewer buyers obviously in that market and fewer properties as well. But when you're talking, Westerville, Worthington, Dublin, Powell, if you're in the 3 to 350 price range, I think is going to be very, very robust if you're fixing and flipping. Hard to do, rentals, straight rentals in those areas because the numbers just don't work. It certainly doesn't even get you close to the 1% rule. But like I said, I like doing lease options in those areas, and I've done lease options on properties up to as high as like 250,000 and have done really well on them. So I think the values are going to stay pretty strong because you've got good schools and you've got good desirability, and that's not going to change.
Yeah. Before we move on to the next question, and I don't know, and I do have to apologize. I just kind of got the chat box open, but if anybody has any questions, or maybe you even put some out there, and if Jim maybe has them, great. If not, please add them to the chat, and I can maybe get a couple questions out because I'm kind of down to my last one here, which is, talking about us comparing Columbus to other markets. Now, we all know that Columbus is a super hot market. It's been that way. That's why we all love it here. But let's talk big picture. We're seeing people work from home, and I, for example, San Francisco. I think San Francisco is in for a real big change because a lot of the companies that do business out there are going to stay at home all the time and work remotely. So I don't, is Silicon Valley going to have a completely reduction in price? Now, does that affect Columbus market? Absolutely not. However, maybe we pick up people who want to move from Silicon Valley, San Francisco, really expensive, to Columbus because everyone in California thinks we're cheap and inexpensive. So what do you think we may or may not be gaining or losing based off what other markets that maybe aren't as you guys have all said, fundamentally as strong as other markets, So, Tim, what do you think?
Yeah, I remember actually you and I talked about that, Mark, a week or so ago about Silicon Valley and in particular, and I think that's definitely going to be an impact as workers, especially middle management, become more mobile. Then they can work remotely. It's definitely going to cause some, maybe a little bit of homogenization, I would say, of markets. So, some of the lower, more affordable parts of the western part of the U.S. or the West Coast might get a little more demand as the craziness of Silicon Valley cools off some. It's interesting. I only deal in Columbus, but I'm in a couple of nationwide networks and masterminds, so I talk to folks around the country a fair bit, and I think a lot of people are seeing similar-ish things as we are here in terms of supply and demand, but Columbus is pretty unique. We are fortunate to have one of the biggest universities in the country. Students move in every year. Many don't leave after they move here. We've got a lot of great companies that continue to hire. So I think that when you compare Columbus to a lot of other markets, it really lends itself well. And I think that the highest end parts of the country, like we just talked about with California, maybe even a little bit with Denver and some other areas. I have a friend that's in Denver that does what we do, and they're definitely seeing some flattening of some of the high end stuff and cooling off for sure, for the same kind of reason as they're not attracting in the last 60 days as many of those six-figure salary people that are looking for a $600,000 or $700,000 house or willing to pay $3,000 in rent because they don't need to, because they can work from anywhere. And there's definitely a little bit of that happening in some of those parts, I believe.
Sarah, what's your take on that? Because people are traveling all over. So is there any impact that you see other cities having on us, negative or positive?
So in my small bubble, I moved here from New York City about 2.5 years ago, and I lived there for 15 years, and I invested in real estate there. And I will say a lot of our friends and old colleagues and what have you are moving out of those areas because, like you guys all talked about, no one has to live in Manhattan to go to work, anymore, or for a lot of these companies indefinitely. And also the allure to live in a place where you can go out and go to the bars or go to Broadway at any time. It's not there for the foreseeable future, maybe January at the earliest. And so a lot of my friends have actually sold their properties, or they're for sale currently, and they're moving to, like, the Jersey area or upstate or Pennsylvania. And so I also have two clients who I manage their Airbnbs for here in Columbus. They live in California, and both are very excited to move back to Columbus to live while they work for their Silicon Valley companies, just to really stretch their dollars. So, I think that is, I don't know how much that's going to affect us. Is that just this little thing that's going to happen and it'll, be a positive effect on some of us, or if it's going to be huge? I'm not sure, but either way, it's good for us here in Columbus.
Hey, Art, you're out in California. What are you seeing out there right now as far as real estate values are concerned?
Yeah, no, so it's interesting because there's a tale of two stories right now, realistically. I mean, you guys have probably seen San Francisco proper. I mean, rent reductions over the last 3 months they're seeing rents down between 10 and 20%, depending on the units, if you can actually get them to pay, which California and landlords a whole different other component in that alone, right? But where you're finding it is they're seeing mass exodus and mass price appreciation in like Marin County, Lake Tahoe, these other areas that are around there. Because the other underlying trend that people haven't really talked about yet is that although the tech companies are saying you might be able to work anywhere, they've also put this little asterisk there as saying that doesn't mean you can take your Silicon Valley salary to Columbus. We'll let you work everywhere else, but they're planned for some salary adjustments or cost of living adjustments based on where you're actually going to transplant yourself. So that's kind of the little underlying story that a lot of people aren't necessarily talking about on that part too, because I think it's easy to say, yeah, we'd love to move from here and go to Columbus or whatnot, and you can take the cost of living thing here and then adjust it. But I think overall, I mean, the concerns on the rental side are definitely huge and I think real, especially in the heart of San Francisco. Because the other part too is if shelter in place comes and goes, are you going to be stuck in a small apartment in the city with other people and or families on that part versus trying to, like I said, move out to Marin County or any of the surrounding areas from the city proper is kind of where we've seen a lot of, I think somebody was talking about it in Marin where they had like 17 offers and I think it went like 400,000 over asking on one property in the heart of the entire thing, right? So it's the deals around that part, but definitely I think rents are the concern, and especially in Class A rents. So the other aspect was we were seeing new buildings that are still trying to maintain artificial rent rolls, but are giving away 1 or 2 months free, but keeping the rent price at the same one. Whereas if you actually factor that over your entire lease terms, it's not necessarily what they're doing, although they're saying it's trying to hold true. But yeah, that's just kind of in general what we're seeing.
Well, I got one more question I'll pose to everybody on the panel here. But sir, first I just want to say thank you to each one of the panelists for taking some time to do this, and we really appreciate that. But I'll ask the same question to everybody, and then please feel free to add any other little insight that you have that you think might be useful for anybody in the Columbus market. But overall, it seems like we're all feeling pretty bullish regarding what the outlook is as of right now and moving forward. But give me the one thing that does concern you, or the one thing that you're still keeping your eye out on. Okay. And then again, if you want to add any other little insight for your parting shot there, please do. Brian, we'll start with you.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, I'm very appreciative that you let me participate in the panel, because I'm learning as much as I'm trying to share, probably even more so. For me, number one is banking. I do a lot of fix and flips. I do a lot of wholesaling and wholesaling. The biggest question mark I had when this all started was, what are my private lenders going to do? And 6 of the 7 active private lenders that I work with were full steam ahead. I've got plenty of capital available. I'm stockpiling cash on my own too, because I don't have a crystal ball. But as long as the financial markets stay liquid and we don't have any kind of a banking crisis, that's the biggest concern that I have for my bigger fix and flip projects and higher dollar projects. Most of what I'm selling right now are rental properties to in-town and out-of-town investors, and they're paying cash. So banking doesn't really matter in that regard, but I still like the numbers I get when I do rehab. So I'm in the same ballpark with Tim. I would rather not, if I can get really good returns just wholesaling or wholetailing versus doing a full-blown rehab, that's what I'm doing. And my private lenders like that too, because I'm in and out with their cash. And I like that a lot. So as long as the financing component stays okay, and we don't have a banking or liquidity crisis, I'm bullish with everything else.
Sarah, what do you got?
Yeah, you know, my biggest concern is whether or not we're going to have a home order soon this fall. I wouldn't be surprised. And of course, that's not great news for any of my own properties or my clients. And so I'm just getting ready to be able to pivot and get creative, especially with my larger properties. You don't see a lot of people traveling with 10 or more people staying in those big houses. So, you know, just again, no crystal ball, but that's the one thing that I'm keeping my eye out for.
Anything else you wanted to add, or just, I didn't know if you had a parting shot there, Sarah.
Parting words? No, I mean, I love short-term rentals. If, you know, my tagline is, but please, if you're going to have one, do it right. Don't just throw a bed and some sheets in there. It's a product. You are selling a product, especially now people are really concerned with safety, and now cleanliness is an aspect of safety, but also just the general safety stuff. I'll walk into short-term rentals and see no handrails going up the stairs. It's the same concerns that you have with long-term, but I mean, you know, these lawsuits are real, and these you can't just be in it for the money. The money's great and it's awesome, but if you put the people first and the product first and be really proud of that short-term rental, then that's what makes it really enjoyable.
Tim, what's your biggest concern moving forward?
Yeah, I think we summarized a little bit of how confident we are in the Columbus market, but I would say if I had to choose something, I'm pretty optimistic about how the pandemic is going to play out. I'd be really surprised to see any more stay-at-home orders, to be honest. I've spent more time researching this thing than I care to admit. I wish I had that time back, to be honest with you. But I'm less concerned about that than I am probably the potential for banking locking up a little bit. I think there's this underlying current of there are a fair amount of people that have mortgage forbearances right now, whether it be on investment properties. They kind of took advantage of the system, I would say, whether they needed it or not, with their own personal mortgages or investment properties or commercial properties. I don't think it's being talked about too much, and I think that there's kind of an underlying current sneaking up on us where the banks have to kind of figure that out. The latest study I read was that there were, I want to say it was over 2 million mortgages in the US that are under a forbearance plan right now. And so that seems like a little bit of a cash crunch for the banks themselves. So I think there's a little bit of a risk there. We use almost all private money, and we have really no concern there. Kind of similar to Brian, all of our private lenders are, honestly, I have more private money right now than I know what to do with. I'm trying to find things to do with it, which is a good problem to have. But from a buyer standpoint, like when we flip a house and somebody needs a standard mortgage, I'm a little concerned that their qualifications are going to get more stringent as the year goes on, and they're going to get a little more selective with their borrowers and that sort of thing. So it's not a huge concern, but I'm a little concerned about how that's going to play out. And for that reason, we've shied away a little bit more of the high end stuff in the last few months. We did just sell one in our Upper Arlington that sold really fast, but that was kind of a fluke for us recently. We've tried to stay more in the first time buyer, $150,000, $225,000, $275,000 houses, and tried to stay away from the ARVs that are, over $350,000, just a little bit for that reason. So that's it. I'm pretty optimistic about everything that's going on in Columbus for foreseeable future.
Fantastic. Well, again, thanks everybody. I'm going to send it back to Jim here for any final thoughts here or things coming up in the future.
Perfect. Thank you, guys. This was fantastic. Panelists, you did an awesome job. I'm going to be quick here because my battery is low, and that will end everything immediately. Just a reminder that July 21st is our next meeting. I will send out a recording tomorrow with Sarah's podcast link. I recommend you listen to it. It's lots of good information there. And thank you all very much. And I look forward to finding out what we're going to do with this little mini group thing that Mark's talking about for one of our next meetings. So we can hopefully at least have some of us together to share a beverage the next time we meet or soon, because that's what I think we're all hoping for. And again, thank you all panelists. This was absolutely great. And we will see you all on July 21st. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Jim.
Thanks,
Have a great
everybody.
night.
Yep.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.